A blazing red Shelby Mustang GT 500 sat smoking on the side of a deserted rural road. A white man in a sweat-soaked silk shirt was frantically trying to make a phone call. Then came a voice from behind. "Excuse me, sir. Need help with your car?" He turned, and standing there was a 12-year-old black girl with bright, confident eyes, a faded canvas backpack in one hand, and on the other a ring glinting green like firelight. Right in that moment, Elijah King forgot to breathe. Comment number 1 if you find this opening shocking, because not everyone can wear a promise that they thought they had forgotten. Under the scorching sun of Hopewell's outskirts, a mostly black town nearly 2 hours outside Boston, Zahara Cole walked home after school. The soles of her sneakers were worn. Her oversized MIT t-shirt hung loose. She passed by dry fields, faded wooden houses, and back garages where old engines hummed and the radio never stopped playing. She often took this shortcut, barely used by cars, but today, there was an exception. That gleaming red Mustang stopped dead in the middle of nowhere, and the man beside it didn't belong here. Zahara Cole, 12 years old, learned to grip a screwdriver before she ever held a pencil. Every afternoon after school, she went straight to the garage behind their house, where oil stains didn't bother her, and tangled wires were friends. Sharp, calm, and observant, Zahara never needed fancy clothes to know her own worth. Elijah King, age 42, CEO of King Enterprises, a real estate empire currently in billion-dollar negotiations with the state governor, an Ivy League graduate, owner of million-dollar vehicles, a man who had never bowed his head for anyone. Until his prized car broke down, at the most unlikely place, before a girl who looked nothing like the consultants he paid. Elijah frowned as the girl approached. "Sweetheart, appreciate the gesture, but this is a high-performance vehicle. I'll wait for a proper mechanic." Zahara shrugged, unbothered. "I just thought, since it's steaming and you're yelling, maybe you'd like a second opinion." Elijah let out a dry laugh, about to speak, but she had already stepped up to the hood, peering into the engine bay with laser focus. "Smell anything sweet, like syrup?" she asked without looking at him. Elijah blinked. "Yes, actually, yes." "Coolant leak," Zahara said plainly. "Radiators dripping. Overheated." Zahara opened her backpack and pulled out a compact toolkit, a birthday gift from her Uncle Devin when she turned 9. "Elijah King," the man said, extending his hand, unsure. "Zahara Cole," she replied, her hands slick with grease, shaking his hand without flinching. In quick motion, she identified the damaged hose. With heat-resistant tape and a wire clamp, she patched the crack. "This won't last long," she said, "but it'll get you to town." Elijah nodded, a mix of surprise and intrigue in his eyes. This girl, her voice, her stare, the effortless way she stood next to a roaring engine. It stirred something in him, something buried, a memory, locked 12 years ago. When Zahara brushed her hair back behind her ear, Elijah saw it. The ring. An old emerald, tied with a thin thread to fit her small finger. And as sunlight filtered through the stone, it cast a crescent-shaped glint, identical to the one he had given a little girl at the Little Seeds orphanage, just days before the home was shut down. The world around Elijah stopped. This couldn't be coincidence. "Where did you get that ring?" Elijah asked, voice rough. Zahara blinked. "It belonged to my mom, Diana Cole. She passed last year. She said it was a promise someone made to me, long ago." Elijah gripped the steering wheel tighter as he invited her into the car. All the way into town, he tried to act normal, but his mind was spinning. Zahara spoke of Uncle Devin, of Aunt Rochelle, of her foster mom, a nurse, who never said much about the past, only left behind that one ring as a symbol of something still left unexplained. Before she stepped out of the car, Elijah handed her a business card. "If you ever need anything, Zahara, anything, call me." She nodded, took it, unaware that in that very moment, a domino had tipped. As Zahara ran into the house, Elijah dialed Detective Ramirez. Find everything about Diana Cole, the ring, the orphanage, and Zahara. Inside a luxury apartment in downtown Boston, Elijah King set his whiskey glass down on the glass table. On the screen before him was an enlarged image of the ring, an emerald stone, marred by a crescent-shaped flaw. Light from the window spilled across his face, erasing what calmness remained. He covered his mouth with one hand, whispering like a confession, I gave that ring to a child I swore to protect, and never did. Comment on the number one key if you ever see an old mistake coming back. Not to blame, but to demand answers. Night had fallen on the 42nd floor of King Enterprises. Outside, Boston glimmered. Inside, the desk was buried in paper files. Not million-dollar contracts, but old, faded documents Elijah had dug up after 12 long years. A blurry scan blinked on screen. Little Seeds Children's Home, Final Audit Report. In the corner, a handwritten note read, Special Case, Zahara, Diana Cole, Contact HK. Elijah didn't remember signing off on anything like that, but the initials HK, those were unmistakable. Howard King, his father. Howard King, once hailed as the king of infrastructure, was the reason Elijah sat in the CEO's chair today. But he was also the man who made Elijah give up a future in research, to carry the family duty. Howard had retired to Florida, but the legacy he built had never truly loosened its grip. On the other end of the phone, Ramirez, the private investigator Elijah had hired, gave a quiet update. Diana Cole, nurse, disappeared from the system after Little Seeds shut down. No official adoption paperwork. Car crash. Possible brake tampering. Elijah lowered his head into his hands. The memories came flooding in. He had visited Little Seeds in 2013 on what was supposed to be a charity visit, or more accurately, a humanitarian PR opportunity arranged by his media team. There, he met a little girl with eyes far too sharp for her age. She loved tearing apart broken toys and rebuilding them better than new. Elijah, moved, had given her his mother's keepsake ring and said, One day, I'll come back. I promise. A few days later, the orphanage was shut down. His father had said, That place's legal structure is unstable. And Elijah never went back. Elijah called Ramirez again. I want you to dig deeper, everyone tied to Little Seeds, especially this name, Diana Cole. A map lit up on his screen, marking 5 similar facilities that had been shut down over the last 15 years. Every single one had a disturbing common thread, acquired by King Enterprises under the label of Land Rehabilitation Projects. Staff records erased. Adoption data vanished. But the name Zahara, though scribbled on a single note, remained. There was only one person who could possibly explain. His father. Boston, tomorrow. 50th floor conference room. Elijah called Howard's secretary. The meeting was confirmed in 10 seconds. That alone spoke volumes about the man's influence. When Howard walked in, his posture was unshaken. Gray suit, cold eyes. He sat down without a word of greeting. You're digging through old files? He asked, as if inquiring about quarterly revenue reports. Elijah didn't speak. He simply slid a photo across the table, Zahara's hand wearing the emerald ring. Howard glanced, then let out a short breath. Still wearing that thing, huh? Who is that girl? Elijah demanded. Just another orphan. What matters is the land. The Horizon project's ahead of schedule. Don't get distracted. Elijah slowly stood. You knew. You knew she was special. You knew Diana took her, and you erased them. Howard rose, unshaken. And yet, here you are, running my company, wearing my name. You're wrong, Elijah said, voice stiffening. I wear the guilt, and I'm done doing that. Howard let out a dry laugh. The world doesn't care about orphans, son. It cares about outcomes. Money. Power. Elijah said nothing more. He walked out. But something inside had shifted. This was no longer about finding answers, it was about confronting the system itself. Back in his office, Elijah opened the wall safe. Inside was the original deed to the Little Seeds acquisition, bearing his signature, signed when he first joined the board at age 29. An unknowing signature. But its consequences were now pressing down on a child's entire life. He pressed a button. "Serena Bennett, I need to see you. It's about a program called Project Prometheus." The flickering light of an old radio glowed inside the small workshop behind the house. Zahara was soldering a circuit board, focused, calm. But that night, the light wasn't the only thing coming alive. From the doorway, Uncle Devin stood silently, holding a yellowed envelope in his hand. "Zahara, remember when we promised to tell you the truth when the time was right?" She looked up, eyes narrowing. Devin gave a solemn nod. "Your mother wasn't just a nurse. She was a fugitive, and she ran because of you." Comment number 1 if you've ever heard a truth that made your whole world shift off balance. The small workshop behind Devin's house was Zahara's sanctuary. Tools hung neatly on the walls. Pegboards nailed with care. Grease stains marked years of repairs. It was where she fixed everything. Old radios, broken generators, failed circuits. But tonight, the one thing she didn't expect to fix was the truth about herself. Outside, the sky darkened. Thunderheads gathered like a warning. Inside, a wooden box was placed on the table. Inside it, a handwritten letter, a small notebook, and the ring. Diana Cole wasn't just a nurse at Little Seeds Children's Home. She was the one who discovered abnormal neural readings being extracted from the kids, Zahara included. After filing an official complaint against the experimental program, she was threatened with termination. But before they could silence her, she disappeared with Zahara into the night, cut off all contact, changed names, hid her daughter in Hopewell. In the letter, Diana wrote, "If you're reading this, someone from the King family has found you. That means the danger has returned. And so must the truth." Zahara stepped back, gripping the letter tightly. "You kept all this from me?" Devin nodded, locking eyes with her. "We didn't lie, we waited. Diana asked us to protect you. Not just from them, but from what knowing the truth too soon might do to you." "Did she die in an accident?" Zahara asked, her voice caught in her throat. Devin looked toward Rochelle, who had just entered, placing a hand on her husband's shoulder. "Brake failure," she answered softly. "But the car had just been serviced." "Someone made sure Diana could never speak again," Rochelle whispered. "But she made sure you still could." Zahara placed the ring on the table. Looking closer, she noticed the base of the setting was slightly off. She grabbed a screwdriver, twisted the gem gently. Click. A hidden compartment slid open. Inside, a tiny microchip. Military-grade storage. "Diana said this was the backup, the real evidence," Devin said. "She smuggled it out the night you both vanished." Zahara stared at the chip. It could hold everything, every truth behind Project Prometheus, a program the King family was willing to bury at any cost. Zahara stood frozen in the middle of the workshop. She was no longer just the girl who fixed radios. She was the center of a story no one ever told her. Yet she'd always been its lead. "She ran to keep me safe," Zahara murmured. "But I've lived like a ghost. No real name. No real past." Devin stepped forward. "But now you have something more. You have the power to finish what she started." Zahara nodded. Tears dropped silently onto the chip she held. "Then I will," she said. "For her, and for every other kid they erased." Devin placed the business card Zahara had tucked in her bag onto the table. "Elijah King. He gave this to you for a reason." Zahara stared at it. Now she knew. Elijah wasn't just a stranger on the road. He was the last link, maybe an accomplice, or maybe someone who could make it right. "I'll meet him," Zahara said, "but not to thank him, to make him speak his part." Rochelle opened another small box. Inside was Zahara's real birth certificate, her name blacked out in thick ink. "It's time," Rochelle whispered, "to take it all back." Night fell. Zahara stood at the edge of the yard, eyes fixed on the glowing lights of Boston in the distance. In her pocket, the chip. In her mind, 100 unanswered questions. She didn't know exactly what lay ahead, but one thing was clear. The ring was no longer just a symbol of a broken promise. It was the key to everything she was about to uncover. The 50th floor conference room at King Enterprises was bathed in cold, sterile light. Glass walls surrounded the space, revealing a breathtaking view of Boston's skyline. Inside, suited executives murmured nervously. The door opened. Elijah King walked in with quiet purpose, a laptop in hand. Following him was a black woman in a gray suit, her gaze sharp enough to cut steel. He nodded once, then spoke, calmly and clearly. "This is Federal Prosecutor Serena Bennett. She has questions about Project Prometheus. Comment number 1 if you know that when truth finally speaks, it doesn't scream. It whispers with terrifying calm." The King Tower was once a monument to power, gleaming glass walls, a boardroom table long enough to walk like a runway for the elite. But today, no one was walking in as a victor. Serena placed documents on the table. A discreet camera, set up by investigative journalist Marcus Hayes, was positioned in a rear corner. This meeting, originally pitched as an update on Horizon Project restructuring, was actually a trap. Not for Zahara this time, but for the very man who once engineered her as an asset. All eyes turned to Elijah. He didn't flinch. He opened the laptop. "Let's begin." Serena Bennett, federal prosecutor. She grew up inside a broken system, denied funding because her school lacked qualifying regional IQ averages. At 12, she was rejected from a gifted youth program. Later, she found out it was funded by King Enterprises and only admitted children labeled extractable potential. Marcus Hayes, a brown-skinned journalist fired years ago for digging too deep into little seeds. He was back now, with no network's permission. Just a live stream and a cause. They weren't outsiders, they were survivors, and they had come not to speak softly, but to ensure silence was no longer an option. Elijah began the presentation. Images, charts, contracts, all linked to something called Project Prometheus. Board members shifted. One finally asked, "Are you accusing the board of criminal activity?" Serena didn't blink. "Not yet, but your silence from this point forward may define your status." Suddenly, Howard King entered. He wasn't CEO anymore, but he walked in like a general summoned to crush a rebellion. "Elijah, turn it off. You don't know what you're doing." Elijah looked up, steady. "You're right, Dad. I used to not know. Now I do." The next video played. Grainy black and white footage. A nurse, Zahara Cole, carrying a child through the back gate of Little Seeds under cover of night. Howard's face drained of color. Elijah spoke slowly, firmly. "The woman you ordered, tracked. The girl you labeled asset number 17. The same one who fixed my car is the one you tried to erase." Under the table, a director discreetly pressed a panic button, but it was too late. Marcus looked into the lens. "Over 10,000 people are watching this live stream," he said. "Many of them survivors of your other 5 orphanage projects." One director whispered, "We're done." The door burst open. Zahara Cole stepped inside, braided hair tied back, plain black t-shirt. In her hand, the ring. The emerald caught the overhead light like a warning shot. Elijah rose. "Zahara, you didn't have to." "Yes, I did," she interrupted. Her voice firmer than any report in the room. Howard scoffed. "So you're Project 17, I imagined something more." Zahara stared him down. "And you're the man who killed my mother. I imagined someone more human." She twisted the ring. Click. A microchip fell into her palm. "Diana hid this inside the ring. Backup copies of everything." Serena nodded. We've verified it. These are original documents signed by Howard King, including funding contracts with military contractors, targeting children. Marcus kept the camera rolling. A junior communications rep in the corner began to cry. Elijah turned to his father. The deal is simple. I cooperate fully. I get immunity. You get a trial. Federal agents entered. No need to restrain anyone. Howard adjusted his tie, stood. History always forgives the powerful, he said. Zahara replied, only if they disappear fast enough. Howard was handcuffed and escorted from the boardroom, a space he had ruled like a throne for 30 years. Elijah turned back, locking eyes with Zahara. I didn't keep my promise, but I'm here now. Zahara nodded, not in forgiveness, not in hatred, but in something stronger, the will to rebuild. Zahara stood at the podium, a spotlight cast directly on her 10-year-old face, holding the microphone with a steady hand. In front of her, dozens of journalists, government officials, and millions watching via live stream. Elijah stood silently at the back of the room. Today he wasn't the one speaking. The little girl who had just exposed the empire built by his family was now speaking in his place. People say I exposed the truth, Zahara said. But my mother, she didn't raise me to expose. She raised me to rebuild. Comment number 1. If you believe exposing the truth is only the beginning, real change means rebuilding the system. 3 days after the historic takedown at King Enterprises, the media and the courts had shifted their focus to Washington. Zahara had been invited to speak at the Federal Press Center. Major news networks were calling her the girl who broke the ring of silence. The room was packed. The mic was ready. At the base of the podium sat the emerald ring, now enclosed in a security glass case as a historic exhibit. Outside, investigations into the Prometheus project had launched simultaneously across 5 states. That same night, King Enterprises stock went into free fall. Zahara was not alone. To her right stood Serena Bennett, the woman who had guided her through every hearing. Marcus Hayes held his camera steady, not to expose, but this time to document recovery. In the corner, Elijah King sat quietly, the tailored suit replaced by a simple shirt, his tie gone, and in his eyes, a man no longer proud but bearing responsibility. In the hallway, a young girl from New Mexico, once implanted with a neural chip in a different facility, held a sign that read, I'm not an asset, I'm a mind. Howard King had been arrested, but inside King Enterprises, the old system had not fully collapsed. Those who had once helped him run the talent harvesting network still sat in executive chairs. Lawyers began their dance, blaming the past, dodging criminal liability, arguing a lack of criminal intent. Some former shareholders convened to propose a solution, a name change. Inside an emergency meeting, Elijah slammed the folder on the table, voice sharp. We're not rebranding, we're confessing, or we dissolve this company. Right now. No one answered, but every look in the room said it all. The surface had cracked, the core remained untouched. Beyond King Enterprises, others were also cleaning house. Some corporations who had quietly funded centers like Little Seeds were now scrubbing logos, changing addresses, editing donation records. On the media, they pretended they'd never been involved. Zahara read the headline scrolling across the screen. Alden Group denies any knowledge of Project Prometheus. She turned to Serena. They're erasing the past. Serena nodded. Then we document the future. At the next press conference, Elijah announced, I'm relinquishing all personal shares. My assets will fund a new foundation. Bright Minds. Zahara watched him from a distance. Her eyes held no hatred, but neither did they offer forgiveness. Bright Minds wasn't charity. It was a safe haven, a place to identify and protect gifted children from overlooked communities, not to be exploited, but to choose their own path. No contracts, no strings, only opportunities, Serena declared. And Zahara, just 10 years old, was named its first official advisor. In a closed-door Senate session, Zahara was invited to testify on the future of national gifted education. A white senator, silver beard, low voice, leaned back and asked, skeptical, "What makes you qualified to advise national education reform at age 10? The room stirred. Zahara didn't flinch. She gripped the mic in her left hand, her right gently clenching the emerald ring in her pocket. Then she spoke, not loud, but every word sliced the air. "Because I survived a system you funded. And you didn't just ignore kids like me. You monetized our pain." The entire chamber fell silent. The camera turned to the row of children sitting behind her, survivors of medical detention camps, now dressed in white shirts, backs straight. They didn't say a word, but their eyes shone brighter than any ceiling light in that congressional hall. The government passed a special budget to support independent centers for gifted youth from disadvantaged areas. Bright Minds became the first prototype. In the official press piece, Marcus wrote, "The girl who fixed a car on the roadside just redirected the course of a nation." Zahara declined the honorary invitation to the White House. She returned to Hopewell, where the small workshop remained open, and the old radio still sat on the table. She didn't choose fame, she chose to rebuild from the ground up, not from the top down. That night, Zahara walked alone through the courtyard of Bright Minds, once the soil of the Little Seeds facility. Under the soft yard lights, fresh bricks lined the walkway. A brass plaque on the wall read, "Every mind deserves freedom. Every talent deserves a future." Elijah stood at a distance, no suit now, just a simple shirt. He watched her, this young girl who had transformed an entire system. Zahara walked past him, no words, no pause, but their eyes met, like two heartbeats once fractured, now silent, because something had finally fallen into place. And in Zahara's mind, one voice echoed, her mother's. "Broken systems don't fix themselves. We fix them, one truth at a time." On a spring afternoon at Bright Mind Center, Zahara Cole, now 15, walked down a corridor lined with sleek glass, sunlight streaming through the solar-paneled dome above. Young engineers clustered around her, carrying blueprints and datasets. She paused in front of the programming lab's door, turned back and said, "When I was 10, I fixed a stranger's car. I didn't know I was fixing a system. Comment number 1 if you believe that small actions can open the gates to changing the entire world." Bright Minds Center now stood on the very soil where the Little Seeds facility once operated. The gray walls were gone, so were the steel fences. In their place, glass, greenery, and the laughter of children. Each section of the center was named after a value: Imagination Lab, Justice Hall, the Diana Room. In one corner of the courtyard, a brass plaque read, "This ground once erased names. Now it builds them." Zahara wasn't just the honorary founder. She personally oversaw the System Reboot Division, training children not just to understand technology, but to reshape it, for the people, not corporations. Zahara Cole, now the center's youngest technology advisor, still wore a simple gray t-shirt. Her braided hair was tied neatly. She was only 15, but already held 3 patents and had become a symbol of hope throughout the system. Devin, her foster brother, was now the technical director, still walking the halls, checking outlets, just as he did when he first taught Zahara how to use a screwdriver. Elijah King, after donating all his assets, lived quietly in a small town near Boston. He often appeared silently at milestone ceremonies, never speaking, always standing in the back row. Despite Bright Mind's success, a group of conservative senators began voicing concerns. Private foundations like these will raise a generation of uncontrollable geniuses, directionless and dangerous. At a press conference, a reporter challenged her, "Zahara, do you believe you're qualified to redesign an entire system to replace traditional education?" Zahara didn't flinch. "I'm not replacing it," she replied. "I'm correcting it. And the biggest flaw is pretending all children are the same." But tension was mounting. An unannounced federal audit was now scheduled, threatening a 3-month suspension of operations. Zahara made a bold move. She invited the audit team to tour the center in person rather than submitting just paperwork. She guided them through each lab, letting the students present their projects firsthand. A 9-year-old girl from Alabama stood up and told the inspectors, "Here, I'm not gifted because I was chosen. I was chosen so I could believe I'm gifted." At the end of the visit, Zahara stopped before the statue of Zahara Cole, her adoptive mother. She said only one line, "We build in her name," but not to remember her, to continue her. On the 5th anniversary of Bright Minds, a small protest took place outside the gates. A group opposing private education held banners that read, "STEM for all, not just the gifted." Zahara didn't avoid it. She stepped outside, empty-handed, and looked directly at the crowd. "Bright Minds was never meant to exclude," she said. "It was meant to catch the ones your systems keep letting fall." A woman in the crowd, once a public school teacher, began to cry. She stepped forward and said, "My daughter has autism." No school gave her a chance. I just saw her coding inside. After that day, Zahara sent personal invitations to 12 public schools, offering to set up satellite Bright Minds classrooms inside state institutions, not in parallel. The Department of Education granted national pilot status to Bright Minds on the condition of public oversight and collaboration with local schools. In a closed-door meeting, Zahara told the department's representatives, "Education is not a one-way map. Every child needs a different path, but someone has to draw it." Bright Minds was no longer the opposition to the system. It had become the catalyst. That evening, Zahara returned to her old room, the one where she'd once soldered her first radio. She took off the emerald ring. It was no longer a symbol of the past. It was something that needed to be passed on. She placed it in a small box and labeled it, "For the next one, who sees systems as puzzles, not prisons." The ring no longer reminded her of a promise someone failed to keep. It reminded her of the one who would carry it forward. Applause echoed through the grand hall. Soft light filtered through the glass ceiling, bathing the first graduating class of Bright Minds in a golden glow. 12 students stood tall, each holding a diploma and a scholarship contract. Zahara, now 15, stepped onto the stage with a quiet smile. Behind the curtain, Elijah whispered as she passed, "You didn't just fix a car that day, Zahara. You rewired our future." Comment number 1 if you've ever witnessed a moment where every sacrifice, every truth spoken, finally turned into something real. Bright Minds was radiant but never extravagant. Each chair had a student's name carved into the wood. On the back wall, it read, "We don't graduate students. We graduate systems thinkers." Outside, families, journalists, and alumni gathered in the garden that used to be the cold concrete yard of Little Seeds. A small glass case displayed the emerald ring. The plaque beneath it read, "The first key, not the last." Zahara took the stage without holding a script. She was no longer just a girl, she had become a symbol forged by her own actions. Devin and Rochelle sat in the front row, eyes misted with emotion. Serena Bennett, now a federal judge, personally handed out the first honorary certificate. Elijah, with nothing left but his dignity, quietly filmed the ceremony on his phone. He had never seen Zahara as someone he saved, but as the one who saved what he nearly lost. "Zahara," a freshman student asked during the Q&A, "what do you think makes someone truly powerful?" The room fell silent. Zahara didn't answer immediately. She looked through the glass wall toward the setting sun. "It's not the ability to fix machines, not patents. It's the ability to refuse silence when you know a system is wrong." Her gaze settled on Marcus, the man who once captured her walking into that boardroom with a ring. He nodded. After the ceremony, Zahara returned to the tech lab. On her desk was a new box containing blueprints for a personalized AI learning system designed for remote children. The project was called the Diana Protocol. She didn't rest. Bright Minds had just signed a cooperative agreement with 12 developing nations to open its first international branches. But more importantly, 3 children in Hopewell, whose families couldn't afford smartphones, were learning logic through robots made from recycled wood. That's what Zahara cared about most. In Zahara's office, a letter waited. Sender: Victoria King, daughter of Howard, now a federal special prosecutor. The letter read, "We've located 5 more child facilities modeled after Prometheus. Using Zahara's data, we've identified 37 gifted children, all rescued." At the end, just one line. Some of them would like to meet the girl who started it all. Zahara read it. No tears, just a smile. She placed it in a drawer labeled Next Steps. That afternoon, Zahara left her office. She walked the long hallway, passing new students learning to code with sound, designed for those with visual impairments. She paused, took off the emerald ring, now a perfect fit, and placed it in the palm of a younger student. "Don't think of it as magic," Zahara said. "It's just memory. The system once tried to erase ours, so we wear it to remember that we're still here." The child closed their fingers slowly, grasping not just a ring but an invisible legacy. That night, the lights of Bright Minds dimmed. In the garden, a group of students still sat at a wooden table, studying beneath soft solar-powered lamps. Zahara stood on the balcony. No speech, no cameras, just silence. Watching. Above the front gate, a new sign had been added. Every talent deserves to flourish. Every child deserves freedom. Zahara was never a superhero. She wore no cape, had no powers. All she carried was a ring, haunted by a broken promise, and a mind once deemed too much for a black child. But that was enough to fix an engine, then a system, then a future. This isn't just a story about justice. It's about the right to exist as you are, even when the world defines you by your silence. To anyone who's ever been cut out of the conversation, dismissed because of your gender, your skin, your origin, remember this: power doesn't come from being accepted. It comes from knowing you don't need to be accepted to begin. To the gatekeepers still listening, systems don't change from the top. They get rewritten from the ground. By people like Zahara, like Imani, who lived it, survived it, and dared to speak it out loud. And if you're in that dark place, where your brilliance is questioned, where your worth is whispered, hold on to your smallest light, because sometimes a ring that seemed meaningless is the key that topples an empire. We are not what they wrote about us. We are the story they can't stop us from telling. If you've ever felt pushed aside, comment number 1 to remind them, you're still here, and you will not stay silent.